Hey y'all, I'm Hope. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm wrapping up all the books I read in October, which is not very many. October just kind of got the best of me. School got the best of me, so it was not as successful a reading month as I had hoped. I was participating in Spookopoly-thon and I ended up only reading one book for that. So, I tried. I kind of got caught up at the beginning of the month, and then both my project partner and I had some life happens kind of moments later in the month, and it just kind of fell apart. But that being said, I did mostly enjoy the things that I read this month, and we're gonna go through them real quick, and then I also have a few pieces of footage from an attempted vlog. I was planning to vlog Spookopoly-thon, and then obviously that didn't happen because I just wasn't reading anything. I wasn't doing anything but sitting at my desk panicking, working on this project. So I'm going to talk about my books real quick, and then there'll be a little montage of some of the more interesting pieces of that, because there were a few fun things that happened at the beginning of the month. So that is the plan, and we're just going to go ahead and dive in. So the first thing that I read was The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas, and I don't remember this book as well as I would like, and I think that kind of says something about how I felt about it. I think I gave this 3.5 stars, possibly 4 rounded up on Goodreads, but I really enjoyed my time with this. I think that it's a fun book, and it's kind of pitched as for fans of Rebecca and Mexican Gothic. I haven't read Rebecca. I do love Mexican Gothic, and I feel like it does this book a little bit of a disservice to compare it to so well-liked, well-known books, because this is a debut, and it definitely feels like a debut. I think there's some pacing issues. The first half of the book really leaps in with the spooky, scary goodness, which I was really happy about. I think that the beginning of this is really strong, and I like the atmosphere that this book builds. I think that Isabel Cañas does a fantastic job with her atmosphere here, and I really like the protagonist, Beatriz, so I think she's really fun to follow. But I think that the Gothic vibe of it kind of falls apart, because a lot of Gothic stories, you have someone who's kind of isolated and powerless to deal with the situation, and Beatriz ends up working with Father Andres, who is a little bit too powerful for the tension to kind of hold. He's almost kind of too capable, and it, I think, frustrated me a little bit that we have Beatriz as this kind of tenacious, determined, resilient protagonist. She's definitely frightened, she gives in to her fear a few times, but she's also got a lot of grit, and she works really hard to try and kind of keep herself calm in this situation and figure out how to deal with it. And I really was frustrated with this fact that she kind of needed a man to come save her in the end. And I don't mean in the end as in the end of the book, but kind of in the situation she needed a man to come save her. There's also another thing with gender that I don't want to tell you exactly what my issue is with it, because it's kind of one of the twists of the book, but there's this thing with gender where there's a character who I think is kind of a natural choice for the villain, and then that character is not the villain, and the person who is the villain instead, I think, plays into some harmful Gothic tropes without really examining those tropes in a kind of critical way. I think that this other character should have been the villain. I know that's really vague. I really don't want to spoil that twist for anybody who hasn't read this yet and wants to, because I do think it's fun, and I think if you're interested in it, you should still pick it up. But I just found that a little bit frustrating because there were so many other interesting things happening in this book. I did really like all of the characters, by which I mean mostly the main characters. I really like Beatriz and Andres, and I can't remember her name now, but Andres' little cousin. I really enjoyed all of those characters. There is also a bit of a problem in this book of characters disappearing for 100 pages and coming back evil. It happens more than once. If I had a nickel for every time that it happened, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. And that kind of threw me off a little bit, but those characters are kind of underdeveloped to begin with, and then they just kind of come back evil. So it was kind of hit and miss. I think it's very clear it's a debut, and I think Isabel Cañas has a lot of space to grow. That being said, I did have a really fun time with this, and I read it really quickly, and I'm very excited to pick up her next book, which I think is Vampires del Norte. I've heard some mixed reviews on it, but I'm interested to pick it up and see her take on a vampire story, because I do think she does a really good job of horror and atmosphere, and kind of those elements were really fun. So I did enjoy that I finally picked this up. I'm glad I did, and it was fun too because my friend had already read this. We got to have some conversations about it, so I enjoyed that aspect as well. Now, I cannot say that I liked the second book that I read this month. This was one I read for a class, and this is Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson, which is a 90s cyberpunk novel. It's one of the earlier cyberpunk novels, and I think kind of considered the quintessential cyberpunk novel. I kind of hate it. I hated every minute I spent reading this. I don't understand why it became culturally relevant, and the only reason I'm glad I picked it up is because of that cultural relevance of just kind of like, I understand now where that influence comes from, but I kind of hate this book. It's really bad. It's really, like, bland. For a book that has so much going on in it, very, very little happens. There's like 200 pages that are just the protagonist, whose name is Hero Protagonist, getting an info dump on some really weird, like, religious conspiracy shit. And he gets this info dump for like 200 pages, and there's a bit near the end of the book where he just like reiterates that entire info dump in a slightly more condensed way to a bunch of other characters. So you have to get all of that information twice, and it was boring the first time. It does not improve upon a reread. And then there's like some interesting characters, but they're all side characters. There's also this weird thing where there's like a mafia character and somehow he's the good guy, and that's kind of unexamined. Like, what are the implications of making the mafia the good guys? So there's just like a lot in here that I think Neil Stephenson went, that seems kind of cool, and put it together without really considering the implications of the things he was writing. There's also just like a lot of casual racism and sexism that also seems pretty unexamined. So I just really hated every moment that I spent reading this book, and I cannot more highly disrecommend a book. The last book I read was Network Effect by Martha Wells, and I'm delighted to say that this fully held up on a reread. I first read this in 2021 and absolutely loved it, gave it 5 stars. Continued to give it 5 stars this time around. I ended up rereading this one in preparation for System Collapse because I have an arc of that that's coming out in a couple of weeks. So I wanted to go ahead and reread this to get back in this world. It's been a while since I've read any Murderbot, so I wanted to kind of reacquaint myself with the characters and the world and all of that good stuff. So having read this a second time, it continues to delight me. This particular book, as the first like full-length novel, I think is really interesting because it has a lot more space to develop character relationships, and there are 2 relationships, actually kind of 3 in here, that get developed in really interesting directions. So I was excited to read those again because I kind of know what's coming at the end now, so I got to kind of see more of or pay more attention to the ways that those relationships were developing. But this one is following Murderbot as it is assisting on a research mission that kind of goes wrong when the crew gets pulled through a wormhole into a different part of the universe, and they find a lost colony. And it kind of kicks off there, so I don't want to say much more, but I think this book is so fun. It's got some really interesting horror elements as well that caught me off guard the first time, but they're so well written and unsettling and eerie, and I think it just has such a great atmosphere. I love Murderbot as a character, and the way it deals with those horror elements is really interesting, and the way that it feels about them is really interesting. There's also some really interesting questions in here. I'm gonna say really interesting 15 more times, so just bear with me. There's some really interesting questions in here about like identity and personhood, and I just really like the way that this series is exploring those questions. So I'm very excited to get to System Collapse, and I'm glad that I took the time to reread this. So those are all the books that I read in October, and now I'm going to have Editing Hope cut to a montage of some other things that happened this month. In the meantime, I got book mail. I got Starling House by Alexi Harrow. This just arrived today. I'm very excited about this. I've read not one of her books, but I read one of her short stories. It was popular, The 6 Deaths of the Saint, like last month. And I really liked her writing, and I was really interested in the premise of this one, so I went ahead and pre-ordered it. And I'm excited to give this one a try. I think it sounds like it's gonna be really spooky, but also possibly quite heartwarming. There's a lot of like family elements in here that seem like they're gonna be interesting. It even sounds like there might be a little bit of a romance as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of things in here that I'm going to love, and I really like Alexi Harrow's writing based on that one short story I read, so I'm looking forward to digging into this one. I just got back from a fall break trip with my family. We were gone for about 3 days, and I'm really glad I went. I was going to stay home originally. Well, actually, originally I was going to go, and then I was going to stay home because they've been exposed to COVID, but they were outside of the incubation period, and they tested negative, and we tested negative. And so we were able to get a cat sitter scheduled, and I did go, and I really enjoyed it. I'm really glad I went. I feel recharged to go into the rest of the semester, so I'm really glad that I did go. But because we're back, I have a little haul of some of the shopping we did, because we did do some shopping yesterday while we were there. And yeah, it's just a nice little trip, but here's all the random stuff I bought while we were out there. First of all, I got the entirety well, I say that entirety is not quite accurate. All but one book of the, hang on, I got something else on the side here, of the Sookie Stackhouse books by Charlene Harris, because I've been wanting to read these for my friend and I's, like, my friend's cursed book club, where I read things that they don't want to know, or that they want to know about that they don't want to read. I read them and tell them about them. It's a very fun time. We have a great time doing that. And I wanted to read these, but I didn't really want to give Charlene Harris any of my money. So I got these secondhand, all but one of them, which I didn't realize until we got back to the cabin we were staying in, that I didn't get book 8, but I did find it on Pango for like $4, so I did get book 8. I just don't have it yet. But yeah, entirety of Sookie Stackhouse. That was actually one of the last things I bought. And then I also got this adorable little Christmas gnome at a shop that was closing. I need to come up with a name for him, but I've got this little guy and I'm gonna set him on top of the bookshelves that I put in here whenever I get those and get them set up. I think he's gonna be so cute up on the top. So I got a little gnome as well. And then lastly, I just got these stickers that I thought were fun. So we have these guys. If I get my face hidden, maybe they'll focus better. Let's see if I can. Come on. There you go. Oh, there we go. Got Yeehaw Possum. There you go. Howdy Frog. Howdy Toad. I think they're great. I love these. This one's gonna go on my bullet journal for next year. Weird camera angle, sorry. But my merch for Jan's Patreon arrived today. It's her new layer design with the layer syllabus. I also ordered one that's 2 cups and it says Tink. So I'm excited for that to get here too. But that one hasn't shipped yet, but it arrived. So, it's so cool. I'm so excited this is here and with plenty of time for me to wear it as things are starting to get colder, because we did finally get our first like good cold snap today. So excited to have more lovely sweatshirts for my favorite part of the year. I love when it gets cold, so I just had to share that. So that's pretty much all I have for you today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, I hope you'll consider giving this video a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting every Tuesday and Saturday, so there is more content coming soon, and I hope to see you in the next video.